You might not want to zoom that lens out until you've wiped off the neck.
Okay.
Spring in Wyoming still feels a lot like winter. We've travelled to Yellowstone with wildlife photographer Jake Davis and the Panasonic Lumix G9. The G9 is Panasonic's flagship stills camera. It's very different to Jake's normal DSLR gear, but we're hoping that along with a collection of high-performance lenses, the G9's speed and tough build will help us capture some great wildlife photographs.
My name is Jake Davis. I'm a wildlife photographer. I live in Jackson Hole, and most of my work is based on the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. I'm fortunate enough to spend a ton of time surrounded by apex predators and all of these incredible species. Most people are not, and so there's a real disconnect. Photography allows people to see the value in wildlife in the natural world.
In late April, Yellowstone National Park is relatively quiet. The summer rush hasn't yet started, and large parts of the park are still under heavy snow.
The greater Yellowstone ecosystem is vitally important. It's the largest intact ecosystem we have left in the lower 48. It's roughly 22 million acres.
As always when it comes to wildlife photography, getting great shots means getting up very early in the morning.
The best times of day for wildlife are definitely first thing in the morning and then the last couple hours of the day. The reality is most of the action is between 5 a.m. and 7.
All right, so we don't want to throw them off. Just sit for a second and let them.
When it comes to wildlife photography, the ideal situation is where my subject recognizes or acknowledges my presence, but it's also a situation where both they and I feel safe, so they accept me as part of their environment.
We just had a coyote mousing on the opposite riverbank here. When I say mousing, he's looking for rodents. So in this case, it actually was probably pocket gophers. And so he's turning his head and listening for movement underneath the ground. And then once he pinpoints it, he'll kind of pounce on it. At 400 here, I had an 800 equivalent, which is just crazy considering this thing weighs nothing. They're probably one of the most adaptable species that we have in the ecosystem. You know, in one day, I've watched a coyote scavenging on a carcass, catch a fish, catch a rodent.
Play chess.
You know, play chess, yeah, have a cup of tea.
Spring is a really exciting time in the ecosystem. Some days could be sunny and 50 or 60 degrees, the bluebirds are singing, and then the next day is a full-on blizzard, you know, a foot of snow.
We've got a bison jam. We have to share the roadway here. Oh, he's a big bull, look at him. He's the size of the Forerunner. Look at him.
The G9 is a professional-grade camera, and as such, it offers extensive sealing against dust and moisture. That's nice to have when you're photographing bison in the driving snow. 6 stops of image stabilization is pretty nice when you're shivering in the cold, too.
So we've got a nice bison herd over here along the Gibbon River. We did kind of a wider scene here. We included the environment, which I really like to do. It tells more of a story. And a fresh dusting of snow, which never hurts. So I think we got some pretty nice stuff here.
As the snow turned to rain, we continued into the park. If you can't handle discomfort, wildlife photography may not be the career for you. Neither is it a career for the impatient.
Let's use this bank to kind of hide us as we approach.
A lot of wildlife photography is simply just time spent in the field, and eventually it pays off. And so you're just very aware, you keep your head on a swivel, and opportunities present themselves. 99% of the time is just really spent looking and waiting. Maybe we get the binoculars out, get a scope out, and we glass the hillside. You'd be surprised at how much you will see if you just slow your pace down a little bit and take some time and just be where you are and be present there. One of the most common mistakes you see in wildlife photographers is just chasing wildlife. I've had to go in the woods after a lady with her iPad chasing a grizzly bear. That's actually not that uncommon of an occurrence.
The quick route is to sit here and howl like a wolf or clap your hands at her like a lot of people like to do, but that's not really rewarding in the end, and you're not proud of that shot. So we just kind of like to sit here quietly. Oh, she's getting up on the bank.
We were headed for Grand Prismatic. the largest and most famous hot spring in the park. On a chilly day like this, the warm water flowing out of the ground was steaming in the cold air. Even in such miserable conditions, wildlife was still abundant.
That was a pretty nice scene, you know,
Yeah.
with the fog coming off and the blowing snow. I was hoping he'd go in and catch a trout, but evidently that was not a good fishing hole.
And even on the coldest, wettest of days, the bacterial mats that give Grand Prismatic its distinctive coloration are still beautiful. The next day dawned very cold, but clear and bright. With the landscape transformed by the changing weather, we headed back into the park to see what we could find.
We're along the Gibbon River, which has some thermal influence, and so whenever we have a really cold morning, you get all this fog, which is just beautiful. And we have this bison herd.
So when I first saw this shot, the fog was really thick and there was no way the autofocus system could get to the bison because I could hardly really see them. But now the fog is thinning a little bit. The contrast is still really low, but the AF is actually nailing it, which is reassuring because trying to establish manual focus in a scene as low contrast as this is very difficult because the focus peaking just has nothing to bite onto.
As the sun came up, the mist burned away and the temperatures started to rise.
Well, we got a pair of sandhill cranes over here behind you. So we have popped on some teleconverters here. We're going to attempt not to make them fly.
The G9's powerful image stabilization also means that we don't need to waste time setting up a tripod. Since we arrived in the park, we've been actively looking for wildlife, but sometimes it just comes right for you.
Coyote incoming.
Park rules stipulate that visitors must remain at least 100 yards from bears or wolves, and at least 25 yards from all other wildlife, including this coyote, who doesn't seem at all bothered by our presence.
For the image itself, I'm looking to capture either some unique behavior, kind of a rare window into my subject's world. You know, they tell a story about the habitat that animal makes a living on.
Oh, there's a bald eagle. Right there. See him in the cottonwood tree? Yeah, nice. So he's sitting right there on the bank of the Lamar River.
The eagle gave us the opportunity for some dramatic still images, but I also wanted to put the G9's video capabilities to the test, focusing on the hawks and ravens circling overhead.
Jake's been taking stills and I've been taking 4K video at 60p on this, and I've just been tracking these birds as best I can at the equivalent of 800 millimeters. I think I got a couple of quite good shots that'll look nice when they're slowed down.
With our time in the park almost over, we headed to the famous Mammoth Hot Springs.
Let's use the high-res shot mode for this since we're going to be on sticks. We can still shoot raw, 2-second shutter delay.
Okay.
Such a detailed subject provided a great opportunity to try out the G9's high-resolution mode. In high-resolution mode, the G9 combines 8 exposures to create a single 80 megapixel image by shifting the sensor in half-pixel increments 8 times.
Wow, that's a lot of detail.
Yeah, it is.
Incredible.
Yellowstone National Park spans millions of acres, at an average elevation of around 8,000 feet. Unlike us, the animals in this ecosystem are free to come and go as they please. Leaving the park, we broke out into the sunshine and came across a herd of bison enjoying the warmth at the lower altitude. And with that, it was time for us to head to lower altitudes too.
Well, it is a very difficult field to make a living in. And I think there's something to be said for that. But I also think that there's a misconception that to do meaningful or significant wildlife photography, you have to travel and go to these exotic places all over the world. The reality is there are stories to be told everywhere. There are species that are in trouble everywhere. And so I would just encourage people to kind of embrace where they are. Maybe you're on the way to look for bears and there's a bluebird or there's a meadowlark.
How many states does this park span?
3. There's a meadowlark. That's cool.
If you go out with the mentality that No matter what is presented to me, I will, receive that and figure out how to make a creative shot with it. You'll come home with a good shot every day.
To see more of Jake's work, visit his website at revealedinnature.com. And for more information on the Panasonic Lumix G9, go to dpreview.com. Thanks for watching.